G'day. I'm Smitty, I'm an alcoholic. Really grateful to be here and be sober through those steps. I'd like you all to stand. Let's hold a moment's silence and perhaps reflect upon our primary purpose. Thank you. I think I might open this meeting with a reading from the big book. A favourite little reading of mine. It's from the end of Dr. Bob's Nightmare. This is a spiritual concept meeting. We'll have 3 speakers. I'll just double check that they're all in the room before I do the reading. Have we got George here? Yay. Have we got Catherine here? Yay. And Darren? No Darren? Oh, it's being very anonymous. All right, well, we might end up having a bit of a God's lotto if we've got the 2 speakers, okay? All right. Now, this is the last, page 180, and it's when Dr. Bob's talking about, of course, his meeting with Bill Wilson. The question which might naturally come to your mind would be, what did the man do or say that was different from what others had done or said? It must be remembered that I had read a great deal and talked to anyone who knew or thought they knew anything about the subject of alcoholism. But this was a man who had experienced many years of frightful drinking, who had most all the drunkard's experiences known to man, but had been cured by the very means I had been trying to employ, that is to say, the spiritual approach. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism which was undoubtedly helpful. This next bit's in that slanty writing, so you've got to pay particular attention. Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked, who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language. He knew all the answers, and certainly not because he had picked them up in his reading. It is a most wonderful blessing to be relieved of the terrible curse with which I was afflicted. My health is good, and I have regained my self-respect and the respect of my colleagues. My home life is ideal, and my business is as good as can be expected in these uncertain times. I spend a great deal of time passing on what I've learned to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. 1, a sense of duty. 2, it is a pleasure. 3, because in so doing, I am paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. 4, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. Unlike most of our crowd, I did not get over my craving for liquor much during the first 2.5 years of abstinence. It was almost always with me, but at no time have I been anywhere near yielding. I used to get terribly upset when I saw my friends drink, and I knew I could not. But I schooled myself to believe that, though I once had the same privilege, I had abused it so frightfully that it was withdrawn. So it doesn't behove me to squawk about it, for after all, nobody ever had to throw me down and pour liquor down my throat. If you think you are an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting what is in this book, I feel sorry for you. If you still think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that's your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and all, I sincerely feel that you must have some help. We know that we have an answer for you. It never fails if you go about it with 1/2 the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when you're getting drink. May your Heavenly Father will never let you down.
Thanks, Dr. Bob Smith. So I'd like to begin by calling George. Would you like to come up and share?
Hello everyone, my name is George, I'm an alcoholic. My home trip's the way out on the Gold Coast on a Friday night at Broadbeach. My sobriety date's the 31st of August 2007, and I'll start by just saying this is the last place I wanted to be today. I'm going through a lot in life at the moment. I've got it coming from every angle, and the last thing I want to do is share, and I want to be around people. But I also know that that's my solution, is to do the things I don't want to do. My life has taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous, my only growth I've ever had is to front up when I don't want to. It's the only growth I've had as a man, it's the only spiritual growth I've had as a man in AA, and I'm going to try and share my story in a way where I'll close about elaborating more on that journey. But I'm also mindful I don't want to, dump on the floor, but I'm here to share for the new man or the new person coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe my experience, if it's shared the way I've been shown how to share it, that it can help someone find Alcoholics Anonymous and set out on a journey of self-discovery, I suppose. Jodie said something that really resonated with me earlier today, and it was about seeing how sick she is, in her words, and I relate to that. And another way, along this journey of mine, it was a few years ago now, I reached out to a mentor, Mick B, Toowoomba, now Pottsville, and I'm doing all these actions in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm doing everything you can do. I'm in the general service arena, I'm sponsoring, I'm on committees and doing everything you can do. And I rang him up one day and I said, Mick, I'm seeing just how sick I am. Is that actually a thing? Does that happen to you? And he said, he's got such a way with his words. He's such a calm person. And he said, along this journey, the veil of self is unveiled, The more aware we become in life, the more we see how much we need this. The more self-awareness I get about myself and my fear. And I'm usually masked by it all my entire life. And the more spiritual actions I do, the more spiritual aware I become. And then that's a frightening thing for some. I don't relate to Jodie. So I suppose the more I see, I've got to do. And that's why I'm here. It's the only thing I know what to do. But if I can go back to share my story, I picked up a drink at 13, and I see now I drank alcoholically. I found a bottle of Passion Pop on the beach in Surfers Paradise with my friends, and I can tell you they were $1.99, and if I had the money, the summer wine was $3.99. And I drank till the bottle was gone, and I drank my friend's drink that he didn't have, the leftovers. And I didn't think anything of it, I just thought that was normal. I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous I had a physical allergy to alcohol, and I didn't even know that until 9 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, I knew I had no off switch, like Jodie was saying, that was just with everything in life, but I didn't understand I had an illness that related to alcoholism. I didn't know what that meant, and most importantly, I couldn't teach someone what that meant if they had it too. The doctor's opinion says this allergy to alcohol interests us. It explains many things for which we can't otherwise account. And when I went through the books, it took me a while to go through the book with someone. I was that defiant person in Alcoholics Anonymous that wanted to do things my way. And I think that's pretty normal for a lot of us. But when I went through that book, I could actually see myself as an alcoholic as described in the book and accept it. But I could go back from that drinking stages, I could see the parties at 15, 16 in the houses, at parents' houses, and I'm passed out in the bushes, and about 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. before the night even started. Explain things like that. It explained why I woke up with my eyebrows shaved or something like that. I'd done something really stupid and the older boys got a hold of me. Why the licences came and why they went and why I smashed up more cars, and they're just byproduct stuff of my alcoholism. But I didn't understand that when I drank I couldn't stop and really bad shit happened to me. But there was this other thing about alcoholism I didn't understand either. And the book talks about being gravely affected, and what does that mean? I didn't drink every day and I wasn't a morning drinker, but I understand today I'm gravely affected with alcoholism. I entered my first rehab at 19, and my last one was at 31, and I was a serial rehab pest. I've been all over the places, all over Australia, in Perth and Sydney and Brisbane and Gold Coast, mainly the Gold Coast. And so I'm in this rehab, fast forward to about 27, 28 years old. And I'm at this rehab at Burleigh on the Gold Coast, and I get 3 months up. And I wanted to, got a Sunday out at the time, you did 3 hours of chores on the weekend, and then you could go out. And at that time, the dole, I think, gave me about 60, 70 bucks a fortnight after you paid the rehab. So I wanted to, you got a chocolate or something, all the rehab people would know, a t-shirt or a chocolate. In that area you did anyway. And finished my chores, and I'm going up down to the bus stop at Burleigh to get a bus up to Pacific Fair. And I can remember it clear as day now. I'm walking down, I was fine, everything was great, everything was just awesome in my life. I was happy. The best belly laughs I'd ever had was in rehab. You know, it's not a care in the world, there's no responsibilities. I look back now. I only say that now because of the shit that's going on in my life. I had nothing happening back then. Literally. And I can remember it clear as day. I'm walking down to the bus stop, and I'm getting on the bus, and this memory comes into my mind about how Mum and Dad used to go to Sizzlers, you know, when I was a kid. And the Sizzlers was next to Pacific Fair. And this is the thought that comes to mind. Oh, it'd be great to have a beer with my with the Sizzlers. Then I'll go to Pacific Fair and get the shirt and the chocolate and stuff. And I goes to Sizzlers and I have my salad bar and all the stuff, and I'm flipping up and I get my little beer. And there's the problem. I have a beer, I have 2 more, no more Pacific Fair, I'm going up the surface and I'm at the Vegas bar. And I don't get back to rehab till 3 in the morning. And the senior staff member or resident has got my bags packed, and I just didn't understand it. I was like, well, where am I going? He said, I don't care, you know. And so I was down the park at Burleigh, not a morning drinker, not a daily drinker, and I'm in the park washing my face. Don't know where I'm going to go. Ring up Dad who's in Sydney and get a hotel at Burleigh with the thought I'm going back to rehab for he had 2 weeks out at the time. And I didn't get back there for a year. Anyway, if I can go back and share another part of this other concept of alcoholism that I didn't understand I had. I went back to the same rehab, and this time I graduated the rehab. And I was doing meetings. And I couldn't be happier. I was going back to the rehab to volunteer. I was doing meetings every day. Everything but anything else, just attending meetings, 2 or 3 meetings a day. Anyway, long story short, the rehab had an annual graduation thing, once a year. It was an honorary graduation thing for people that graduated. So I goes to this dinner about a month outside of the meeting, the rehab. Get my graduation certificate that said I graduated rehab. And I'm walking back to the place I'm staying at, this little 1-bedroom place in Burleigh. And this is the thought that comes to mind. It'd be great to celebrate with a drink. Out of the blue. Was happy as a lark. I couldn't actually... It was showing off. Couldn't believe it. I'd never had time up outside of a rehab. 11 years of rehab, and I'm out there. And I'm loving it. And that's the thought that came to mind. I got a drink, I went back to the room, I went back out, got another drink, went back to the room, and then I'm in surface. And all I remember now is getting out of blackout, coming in and out of clubs, blood all over me, wouldn't let me in. I wanted to go more, and I wasn't allowed to go in. And then I ended up at a brothel in Bundle because I knew they'd give me a drink if I was going to see a girl. I didn't go there to see a girl this time, I just wanted a drink. And somehow or other I get back to my unit at Burleigh and the sun's coming up and I'm looking in the mirror crying. And I don't know how this has happened to me. So that's been gravely affected with alcoholism for me. And I didn't understand that. Even though I wasn't a daily drinker or a morning drinker, whenever I put a drink in my system, all bets were off. I had a physical allergy to alcohol, and I was never going to do it again. All the drinks I had that were disasters were 2 drinks. I'm only having 2. I'm only having 2. I'm not getting in a car, I won't do that again. I did it again. I remember being in tears to Mum in the last few years in the morning saying, I'm never going to do it again, Mum. And I smashed up her cabinets and little collectible items that she had the night before. I'm never going to do it again, Mum. And in the end, I changed my mind by lunchtime. I was gravely affected with alcoholism. There's a part in More About Alcoholism about Fred, and it's the last story. There's 4 examples in More About Alcoholism. And Fred's having this time of his life, and he's got a business thing, and everything's fantastic, and he crosses the threshold, and he picks up a drink. It'd be a good idea, he thought. And a couple of pages later, a couple of members of AA visited him and hit him with the good news and, kick him while he's down, so to speak. That's what's recommended. Give it to him. And they piled on heaps of evidence that he was an alcoholic. And it said anyone that suffered that type of mental thinking is gravely affected with alcoholism. And that's what gave me my chair in AA. I actually owned my chair for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous when I went through that. Now, that was a journey in itself because it wasn't until 9 years sober I understood that. At a year and a half, I got a sponsor. I had a great experience. I believed I experienced something called the promises in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was at a meeting at 18 months sober and I was fighting with the ex at the time. And we got to step 12, though I hadn't sponsored someone. And it was in the thick of it, always was in the thick of it. And I get home that night and the sponsor texted me, he goes, did you get that newcomer's name? Did you go speak to him? And I don't like swearing too much, but to give you context of what I texted him back, just so you know. I texted him and went, fuck the newcomer. Yeah. What about me? And I say that now with shame, but that's exactly how it was. I didn't understand. I really couldn't grasp what is he talking about. He knows what I'm going through. And so I met him, I called a coffee meeting with the sponsor and I sacked him. Grandiose fashion. I had a coffee shop meeting and I said, mate, it's over. Honestly, that's how it was. It's so crazy. I think my whole day was planned about how I was going to do it too. That's my days just consumed with me and what they've done to me, and then I'd sing that song for the next few weeks. I sponsored myself in AA for the next 7 years. And I'll tell you what that looks like. That's 9 years sober, an assault charge, 1 looming, not talking to any family member, in family courts. And I was with my now wife, and I just left a meeting, Early Birds on the Gold Coast. And I went to a coffee shop and someone had said a joke. I'm not a tough guy, but just to give you context what happened, I briefed him across the counter. I was screaming in his face because I didn't like what he said. I just snapped. And I rang up the wife and I said, I think I'm going to get arrested. And she goes, what's wrong with you? I said, I'm fucking angry. I'm really angry. And so that was almost 9 years ago now. And I went back to that sponsor I rang him up. Get this right, we're on the Gold Coast, it's this big. Both active attenders of AA meetings. I might have seen him once in that 7 years. These are the different meetings we were attending. I was going to blood and guts, war stories, it's a competition and all this stuff. The bigger the story, the better. And he was going to book studies, he was doing service, and he was doing all these other things. And so I rang him and I said, would you please help me? And he said, I've got to think about it. So it was bad because the assault that I did was AA related. And he knew about it. I wasn't a very good member, I'll tell you that now. And he rang me back the next day and he goes, I've thought about it and I want you to go get a home group. I want you to get a job in that group and come back and see me. And I went and did that. I was desperate because I knew he had something I didn't have. And I wanted it really bad. There was a part of me that just knew. This is where my journey with God really began, because just before I did that, I prayed to God to show me what my role is in life and in AA, because I just didn't know. I was so lost in life. I was like that 13-year-old. I just didn't know who I was. At 36 years of age, I just lost in AA, lost in life. Who am I? You know, at 9 years sober. So I joined a group and I got a job in that group that day. And I rang him back, so I'd done it. And he goes, okay, well, that's me. And I thank that man for changing my life. He would never say that. He'd say it was your willingness, but I just know. I could have asked other people and it wasn't what he gave me. I'd do anything for him. And so I went through the steps again. I had this huge experience, and for the first time in my life I started sponsoring other men. At 9 years I'd never sponsored anyone. And along came this journey of, he taught me all legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, and after the steps we got into the traditions. And he pulled out the service manual. I'm like, what's this shit? You know, and we used to meet to read that. Then he got me in the service structure. I did district, I did every position of district, and I did area, I did almost every position in area. I was there for 7 years. And I tell you now, the only time I've grown in my life is in that time frame. Because I did things that he taught me the meaning of sacrifice. You know, and all the way from the start too. Back in the 9 years when I was in the throes of the fourth step, he'd bring me on the way to work and I'd say, okay, what are you going to give me today? He'd go, I want you to go do the washing and the folding. What are you talking about? What would I do? I didn't say that because I was scared of him. You know, so I did the washing and the folding as well as the step work. I did all these things that he taught me about sacrifice. Probably the most important principle in Alcoholics Anonymous for me. Because I don't want to do these things. I don't want to help out. I don't want to help the wife. It's me. I want to go do things for me. That's my first thought. And it might seem something really simple, but it's something really big for this person here. Because it's the only growth I have is when I'm off myself. You know. And a lot's been spoken about God today. I couldn't tell you much about God. But I can tell you when I do things over here, I step out of my life and I'm not ruling my life, and I give God a chance to work in my life when I'm doing things over here. And that's God for me, is when I do service or do something or show up or front up, I'm not ruining my life. Because that's what I do. I'm really good at that. I'm really, really good at that stuff. And so I look back now and I'm 50 in February, and the last 9 years has been this journey of spiritual growth. Dare I say, a little bit of spiritual growth. And I look back and I go, wow, it's the only time I've grown up. I was a man baby all my life. Exploding with rage, exploding at everyone else, everyone's at fault, look what they've done to me. You know. And I look back and whenever I was doing service or up at a certain area centre or sponsoring someone on a committee, it's the only time I've sat and grown. And it's taken time, it took a long time. It took me about 7 years to look back and go, oh wow, you don't explode anymore, you know. You can handle life, you can handle the things that are thrown at you. So a lot of life happens, you know, and the last 3 years, a lot's happened in my life. My wife lost her mum, and I've lost mum and dad last year, and there's family members coming out to challenge estates and all that crazy. And it's always the people that aren't in recovery. My wife's she's in recovery, it's her siblings, and now it's my siblings, and I've also gone through a lot with my kids, my older kids from another marriage, and without getting into too much, the court gave me full custody because of some bad shit that happened at the other house. So that's been a journey, and now recently that one of the kids is caused me a lot of grief, and that's just a parent with a teenage girl, and I'm not the only, person going through that stuff, and without getting into too much, having full custody is there for a reason, and she's run away, and mum's just like in the last 2 weeks absconded the state and gone off with the daughter, and it's and I don't want to go into too much because it's dumping, but it's just like, I'm praying to God about a month ago with all this starting to happen, and I'm like, because I got through a lot of stuff in the last few years by thanking God and actually going through the challenges and still showing up, because I'm sponsored in a way where you just show up, and that's why I'm here, because Vic asked me a couple of months ago and I'm like, oh, go away. That's the truth, but I know I can't say no because that's the way I'm sponsored. All right, Vic, thank you. I'm praying to God, and I'm praying going, I suppose I'm supposed to thank you for all this, am I? Because that's how I got through all this other pain. Thank you for another opportunity to grow, because I see that these growth moments. But it's been really challenging the last couple of weeks because I'm like, how much do you want me to fucking grow, mate? That was actually one of my prayers. Like, come on, mate, are you serious? But I was sharing with Jodie before I was crying, and I'm such a defiant person because I know what the solution is, but when I need God the most, I'm there about 1/10 of the time. And when things are really good, I'm with God all the time. And when things are really bad, I'm like, I'm just defiant. Like, I don't understand that part of me, but I know that's where it's at. Thank you guys for listening today. I hope it was all right. That's all I know what to do is to show up and be honest, and the best thing I can do is probably lean in more on God at the moment. Thanks, guys.
I'm an alcoholic, and I'm sober today thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous and my higher power and some very good sponsorship from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group is the Coolum Groups, who has 4 meetings a week, and my sobriety date is the 12th of June 1992, so I'm in my 32nd year of sobriety. And I was found out yesterday that they needed a backup speaker, and I always find that being asked to speak at an AA meeting is one of the more glamorous ways that I get to be of service. I get to dress up a little bit and put on a little bit of makeup, which are things I don't do much anymore, and it always feels very special. But then the other thing that happened is that they said, well, it's a spiritual concept thing, instantly my head was like, what are those? Because I had this funny thing that happens in sobriety where people say, we would like you to share on this, we think you have something to offer, and then on the inside I go, I have nothing to offer, I don't know what you're talking about, and then I feel I have to go away and do a whole lot of research. Thankfully there's AI these days, because I did have a PDF of the Big Book up on my phone last night, and I was searching the PDF for the words spiritual concept.
And if you've ever been into the Netherlands PDF, it's broken into many, many chapters, and so you sort of have to go in and out, in and out. I thought, this is crazy. And then, so I AI'd it instead, and AI gave me about 12, maybe a little less, spiritual concepts, and they are things like honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, patience, perseverance, that's one joined together, awareness and service. And I was sitting in the meeting this morning and I was looking at the banners and I thought, oh my God, they're all around me, these spiritual concepts. They're, you know, the courage is in the Serenity Prayer, and the service is in the traditions, and the discipline is talked a lot about in the big book and by the speakers here this weekend, about the discipline of showing up day after day after day, meeting after meeting after meeting, the discipline of putting pen to paper with the inventory process. And I thought, I'm immersed in spiritual concepts all the time when I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so just to quickly qualify, you know, I was a happy child until about the age of 2. And then the spiritual melody kicked in, you know. I was restless, irritable and discontent. I didn't want to go to kindergarten, and I felt very different to the other, you know, 3-year-olds at kindergarten, and I would find myself sitting in the corner eating the macaroni, painted macaroni beads that we were meant to use to make jewellery. You know, I would find myself being cut out of, you know, access to the steam engine that was strangely in the playground back then. I don't think that can happen anymore. You know, that spiritual melody just continued to cut me off from the sunlight of the spirit for really until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and throughout part of my sobriety. I don't come from an alcoholic family. I come from a family that gave me the best of everything that they could within their power. But, you know, I was an angry, restless, irritable, disgruntled kid that was way too smart for her own good. And, you know, I by the age of 12, I had felt that I was never going to be any good at being good. So I was going to be good at being bad. And alcohol had a stigma attached to it, and I thought, that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to drink. And I took some alcohol to celebrate the last day of primary school at the age of 12, and really, you know, that just, I lost the ability to control my drinking at a really young age. I was a blackout drinker by the age of 14. I was mixing liquor and narcotics, prescription narcotics at the age of 14, and before I had even qualified to take a legal drink in this country, you know, I had gone to jail. I had spent time living in a psychiatric hospital, and I had tried to kill myself. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says if we're alcoholic and we continue to drink, that we, you know, we go to jail, we go mad, or we die. And I had begun to experience the effects of alcoholism at a really young age, but I didn't know that that was my problem. You know, I spent quite a bit of time before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous trying to control my drinking, but I didn't know I was trying to control my drinking. I was just trying to, like, get my life back on track. And so I would have a series of fresh starts. I'm the queen of fresh starts. You know, I'm going to do this new diet and everything's going to be better. I'm going to only have 2 drinks on a Friday and that will make everything better. I'm going to, you know, take a job in another city. That will make everything better. And I was a queen of fresh starts. But, you know, everywhere I went, you know, because I didn't know that alcoholism was my problem, I didn't understand that I had a disease where when I put alcohol into my body, I activate a craving that I can't control, the phenomenon of craving. I just couldn't put 2 and 2 together. And I actually didn't know anything about alcoholism. But I had a friend who, you know, it was very complicated drinking relationships. He was my friend, he was my colleague, he was my drug dealer, he was my, he was my mule. And he had gotten sober in Alcoholics. We had tried to quit drinking together. Those drinking competitions, let's try to not drink for 2 weeks and see who can do it, And I would always lose, like screw this. And anyway, he was 8 months sober in Alcoholics Anonymous in Sydney, and I was in Melbourne, and I rang him to say, my life is really a mess. And I thought he would say, oh, you just worry too much, you just feel bad about partying. And he didn't. He said, do you think you have a problem with drinking? And it was such a bizarre proposition. It kind of shocked me. And I said, I don't know, but, my life is fucked up. And he said, why don't you give Alcoholics Anonymous a ring and then call me back and tell me what they say. And he 12-stepped me over the phone from Sydney, and I got to my first meeting in Melbourne in 1991, about, 4 days later. And I don't remember anything about what was said at my first meeting, but this old couple, I was 24, and it took me out for coffee, terrible coffee afterwards, at 9:30 at night, and this old man who didn't end up staying sober, but he shared with me about when he drank, he had alcoholic blackouts, and I remember thinking, that's what happens to me, and he's saying that that's an alcoholic blackout, and maybe I'm an alcoholic, and I identified just enough with that other person that when they dropped me off at my front door and said, we're going to come and get you tomorrow night and take you to another meeting, I said okay. And they came and got me and took me to meetings. I didn't stay sober from my first meeting. I absolutely could see that, that if I stopped drinking, that the suffering would go away. I got that connection, but I didn't, like somebody else shared, understand that my life was unmanageable. And so I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. At that time in Melbourne, they would say things like, just sit in the seat, don't drink, don't worry about the God stuff. And, don't worry about don't worry about the steps, don't worry about the God stuff, just don't drink. And I would sit in meetings and I would look at the banner of the 12 steps and I go, I know that's got something to do with it, and they're telling me not to, and I know that this is not everybody's experience, but it was my experience. I know that that's got something to do with it. And, I had a lot of, if you're new or struggling in Alcoholics Anonymous, I really encourage you to find somebody who has worked the steps as they're written in the big book. They are the best person to help you recover. Because that was not my early experience. I had some really strange advice from people who didn't have experience with the 12 steps. The short story there is that I drank again. I didn't have to leave Alcoholics Anonymous to do it. I was still coming to meetings, but I was chasing other things. I thought, getting sober young, that I had been denied some life opportunities. I thought I needed a better job. I thought I needed a better body, and I thought I needed a better relationship. And those things were somehow owed to me now that I was sober, and I began to chase those things. But what happened was, the unmanageability of me chasing those things my suffering in sobriety became so intense, and with no solution, I had no other option but to pick up drink again, and I drank. While I was drinking, a woman who had gotten sober in Hawaii moved from Hawaii to Melbourne, and she had worked the first 9 steps in her first 90 days, which was a very strange concept back in 1992 in Australia. And she had been to a meeting every day for the first 3 years of her sobriety, and she had read the big book, and she thought that getting sober was cool, and she had also gotten sober young, and she became my sponsor, and she just would not let me focus on anything else but recovery. And she would say things to me like, you have a spiritual disease of alcoholism. Your treatment is a spiritual treatment. She said if you had a disease of cancer and you had to go get chemotherapy 5 nights a week, you would not be negotiating on those chemotherapy sessions. She said meetings are your spiritual treatment. You go to meetings. And then she spoke to me in a language that was so clear that I kind of got it. So I was beginning to experience a little bit of humility with her, but the greatest humility came around the third step. She said to me, "Where are you with the steps?" And I said, "Well, I kind of think I've done 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you think you've done 1, 2, and 3, and that's your answer, you have not done 1, 2, and 3. And she's like, "All right, well, I want you to read this bit every night in the big book. It starts after the 3 pertinent ideas that are read out, And she said, I want you to read a couple of pages, and it's about the third step. I want you to read it every night for a week, and then I want you to call me back and tell me what you think it means." By this point, I was following direction, and I did read it. Now, I'm smart, and not so smart that I could complete my first university degree, but I'm generally quite a smart person. And, but this big book was written in Middle America in like 1940 or whatever, and it was hard for me to understand it. And so I read it, and I called her back, and she's like, "What do you think it means?" I said, "I don't know." I started to get a bit honest with someone. So humility and honesty, I said, I don't know what it means. And she said, "Catherine, the way I understand the third step is that I make the decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, and that I immediately demonstrate to God that decision by working on step 4. And it was like, oh, it's like it kind of like just started to click in, like it started to make sense. Oh, I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, and now I need to take some action to demonstrate that I mean it." And she's like, "Yes, 4th step. Look in the book, 4 columns." And I'm like, okay. Now, I would like to say that I was a good student, and I went out and immediately started working on my 4th step, but I didn't. I started working on a resume for a job that I thought would fix my life. You think I would have learned, but anyway. And she had something that I wanted. They said, "Get a sponsor who has what you want," right? And she had a great job, and I really wanted a great job. And so I rang her up and I said, "Oh, I'm working on my resume. Can you help me?" And she said, "You're writing a 4th step. Go write your 4th step." And she hung up on me, and I was so mad. Which is the perfect place to be to write inventory. So I was so mad, and I realised that there was no other way forward with this sponsor, except I had to do what she told me to do and get through it quickly, and then maybe I could pursue a few other things, right? So I wrote my 4th step. I was getting sober at 25. I didn't have a lot of wreckage of the past there. I've had way more wreckage of the present and staying sober for 32 years, I can tell you. And then a week later I was in her living room, and we were down on our knees saying the 3rd step prayer. I was reading my inventory to her. I could really only do the first 2 columns. I didn't even understand what the word resentment meant. She's like, "Whatever is pissing you off." I was like, oh, that unleashed a floodgate. Anyway, so pen to paper. She is helping me complete column 3 and column 4. I don't know what's affected in me. I'm like feelings on steroids in early sobriety. It's all just a feeling. I don't know what they are. I don't know where I'm being, fearful and selfish and, financially insecure, and where my security is being threatened. So she helped me to identify those things in me, those objectionable things in me that block me off from the higher power within that we've heard talked about. It says in the book, where is our higher power? It is within. How do we find it? We've got the steps to clear the shit from the channel that allows me to have, a closer, to be more aligned with that God-given instinct. So she's helping me to, clear out that channel by identifying what's in it. She's telling me how to go out and make my amends. You need to have a coffee with that person. You need to sit down with these people and say this and ask their forgiveness. And, so I set out to make, thankfully there weren't too many amends back then. And, what happened was, through that process, I began to have the spiritual experience as described in the big book. And I would be driving, I remember driving along the street. When I was drinking, I'd always look at like groups of women, young women, sitting, having picnics or whatever in the sunlight. And I'd be like, how do they do that? How do they just sit and do that? Just hang out with each other? Like, it was so mysterious to me. But I remember when I was like working on my ninth step, particularly after the amends with my family, and I remember like walking down the street being like, I'm with the people, you know? And that was kind of like an arrival moment. I'm with the people. I just felt a bit more connected, and I was certainly a lot happier and a lot less intense than I've been in the previous kind of 18 months. Anyway, so humility, some willingness to do the work, and you know, patience and perseverance. I made amends to my father. You know, sat down on the couch and said, you know, Dad, you know, I had a spiel, and you know, I'm alcoholic, and I was selfish when I did this, and I'm sorry that I did this, and I understand my actions today. And at the end of it, you know, with a lot of my amends, you know, I asked for forgiveness, and how can I make this right? You know, I said to Dad, you know, can you forgive me? And he said no. And my father never forgave me. I have to tell you, until the day he died, my father never forgave me. But I tell you, what that has, and it really, it has been, it was, my father died 7 years ago. It was one of the greatest, sort of, I would call it the silent tragedy of my sobriety, that I could never have a relationship with my father that I wanted. But I had to show up year after year after year, patience and perseverance, practicing being a loving and dutiful daughter with no expectations. And at times it felt like it would break me. But I did it anyway, because that's what I've been taught in Alcoholics Anonymous, patience and perseverance. It doesn't, I mean, we hear a lot about miracles here. I remember saying to my sponsor once, I was going for another job, I said, it will be a miracle if I get this job. And she said, it will be a miracle if you don't, you know. And so, you know, miracles. We talk a lot about the big miracles here, but, you know, for me, sometimes it's the slow, patient work that reveals a slow, quiet miracle that, you know, and that has been true of my recovery in lots of different ways. You know, I was reading Bill Wilson, one of my favourite writings of Bill Wilson in Language of the Heart. I guess he's around 20 years sober, and he writes about emotional sobriety being the frontier of sobriety. And in the writing, it's a very short letter, he writes about, you know, and it's what we talk about. We cannot transmit something we haven't got. And he writes about, I need to love God in order to love somebody else, right? Because I think I have to love somebody else, and God is just there, right? But love God. So, you know, for me, the main relationship in my sobriety that I've had to kind of work on is not with a human being, but it's with my higher power. What am I doing in that relationship? Because great events will come to pass for me and countless others. I find that when I work on my relationships with human beings, they never work out terribly well. people leave, or they don't like me, they find me overbearing, you know, all these things. But when I work on my relationship, when I, you know, surrender and work on my relationship with my higher power, great events come to pass for me and for countless others. It's not just about me, right? So, you know, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? Oh no, don't say that. She just said you have as much time as you have as much time as you want. Like, no. I need boundaries, right? I need parameters.
12 seconds.
Perfect. So another spiritual concept, service, and you know, I was encouraged, like some of the other speakers here, to get into service really early in sobriety, once I changed my sobriety date. In Melbourne at that time, there were a lot of new meetings starting up. So when I came in, there weren't a lot of young people, and a bit like what Jodie was sharing, it's tough getting sober young. I mean, back then, 24 was young. It's not so young anymore. I have a friend in the States. He got sober at 13, and he's been sober now for like 50 years. He's my age. And, you know, the schoolyard was his old environment, and he's been continuously sober all that time. But, so I did find that there was a home group that was getting started, and there was a lot of young people and a lot of enthusiasm, and we were all encouraged to get service commitments and really own them and be proud of them and show up for them. And so, I would find that when I'm in service, I'm generally a happier person. It may not manifest on the outside, but on the inside, I'm a happier person. And although there's service, I'll be frank, service drives me nuts at times, because I have to, particularly my service work where I sit on committees. I mean, oh my God, sometimes hell is an AA committee. And, but generally, this is me going to service with the service committee. I have one committee commitment at the moment, sorry to the district people who are here. I'm like, oh God, district committee tonight. Got to go sit in a room, no one's going to be there, nothing's going to happen, ugh. And then, and sometimes that's true, sometimes no one's there and nothing amazing happens, but I go with one of my sponsees, she has a commitment, and we're coming home, we're always pumped. It's like we've been to a concert, and I was like, yes, life is great, and this person said this, and that group's doing that, and it's so exciting. And so that's been my sort of regular experience of being in service in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the main, one of the main learnings I've had is that, the steps have helped me in my recovery, but the traditions, these are not academic words on a banner. These traditions can only be experienced in service. You can't sit there and think, the same way that I can't think my way into recovery. I have to act my way into recovery. I can't understand the steps to work them. I have to work them to understand them. It's very frustrating for me. I would like to take the big book and sit in my room by myself and study them and get well, but it doesn't work like that. It's the same with the traditions. You can't study the traditions. The only way to work the traditions is to be in service, sitting at a committee table usually, or a group conscience, and practicing the things that the earlier older sober members learnt from our Alcoholics Anonymous becoming the anarchic organisation that it is. So service has brought me an awful lot of joy, although I nearly always say, okay, I'll take that service position, oh my God, but it always brings me joy. I have 2 service positions at the moment. I did, when I was in very early recovery, sit on a massive committee for the first international AA convention on the Gold Coast. I think it was 1993. And being in service and on committees has taught me an awful lot about how to be a human being, a decent human being, and a human being with integrity, integrity is another spiritual concept, right? Sitting on a committee and listening has taught me a lot about integrity as a human being and moving in the world with integrity. I just, I own my life. I'm going to just talk a little bit about, hope. I owe my life to Alcoholics Anonymous. I came here. I had been living for a number of years with the belief that I would be dead by the age of 25, and in true alcoholic, style, I had no desire to sort of pull up out of that trajectory. I just was accepting that would be my situation, and I got here at 24, and that seems miraculous to me. I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous or alcoholism until I got here. And then, with my sponsor, I always call her. She's not my sponsor today. She's in Santa Fe in the United States, and I have a sponsor here in Australia. But I call my original sponsor on my anniversary, and I always say, "You saved my life." She said, "No, you saved mine," because that's how it works. We have to give it away to keep it. She would be like, I'd always be like, too scared to call her in case I'd ruin her day. Very selfish, very self-important person I am. And she'd be like, I need to hear from you. I need you to stay sober. And she taught me a lot about, sponsorship is not about me giving you something. It's about me, trying to stay sober myself. And so, I've had a lot of experiences throughout my sobriety where at times, like with previous speakers, seemed so dark and desperate. And I have said prayers, you know, at times like, God, it's too much. I can't do this. You have to take something away. But, you know, with the support of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've managed to get through everything and stay sober. And not only stay sober, but be a fairly decent human being for the most part. I've been through some difficult things, but right now it's really good, and I really am enjoying this peaceful time in my sobriety. So I just would like to say, if you're new, welcome. Strap yourself in. It's the biggest ride of your life. Please, you know, get a sponsor who has worked the steps as they're written in the big book. Get into service, get a home group. These are the things that saved my life, eased my suffering, and have allowed me to keep coming back a day at a time. Thank you.
Now, have I got it right? There was Jody Dowling? Yes. Welcome.
Hey friends, my name's Darren, I'm an alcoholic. A very grateful member of the Woolwich Beginners Group in Sydney. I'm sober today through the grace of a loving God that I still don't really understand. My sobriety date's May the 27th of 1994. I put my glasses in the car ready to race to the airport shortly, so I can't see anyone, so I feel a whole lot better about being up here. What a weekend. I was saying to Chris earlier, I said, man, you've been keeping this secret up here on the coast all these years. Because yesterday I just got cracked open from all of you good people sharing your truth, sharing honestly about where you're at, you know, what happened, your experience in sobriety, in life. There were some Al-Anons here yesterday talking about people not making it. And I started thinking, because it's all about me, I started thinking about my kids not having a father. I didn't make it. Really opened me up to what I can miss if I fall asleep. And unfortunately, I fall asleep all the time in Alcoholics Anonymous. A little bit about me so that you'll actually listen. I am an alcoholic. I listened to George talk about one of my least favourite drunks of my entire life, Passion Pop. I did that once too. There's something very awful about vomiting passion fruit flavoured champagne, and my first drink was a 50-50 mix of Scotch and Coke, and up until that point in my life I never felt right. I didn't know what was wrong with me. People would try and tell me what was wrong with me my whole life before that. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but when I took that first drink, everything was okay. Everything was okay for the first time in my entire life. I didn't have words for it. He asked me, at the time, how do you feel? After I took this massive, 4 or 5 big gulps of whiskey and cola, I would have said I feel good. But with hindsight, I've got some words. I understand what happened to me that day. I didn't know that I was filled with guilt, shame and remorse. I didn't know I hated myself to my bones. I didn't know how self-conscious I was. And alcohol removed all of it in an instant, just like that. The number one thing that it removed was me thinking about what you're thinking about me, because that was my greatest obsession. Because I thought that you could see straight through me and see how much I hated you. And I was just, walking around on eggshells my entire life, waiting for you to rage at me and whatnot, given the childhood that I had. And alcohol just removed it all. Thank you. I became extremely violently antisocial pretty much from my first drink. And that's not everyone's story. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of people here who've never been arrested as a drinker. Anyone? Anyone never been arrested? What's wrong with you? Like, seriously, you call yourselves alcoholics. I was charged and convicted for 28 criminal offences by the time I arrived here at the ripe old age of 21. And it wasn't because I was a master criminal. I was just a Fruit Loop every time I drank. You know, I'm the guy that, you know, we run out of alcohol, so we kick the doors into the bottle shop and you know, 3 or 4 kids, and everyone grabs 2 full bottles of whatever and runs. I'm just there flipping lids, drinking in the bowls. Like, I don't give a shit. I don't care what you think about me when I'm drinking. I don't care about the police. I don't care about my parents. I don't care about anything or anyone. I'm completely without any inhibition whatsoever every time I drink. I do whatever I want. I don't care about you. And, you know, I'll be shooting pool, 1 minute having fun, next minute I'm swinging pool cues at you, throwing pool balls. We'll be at a party, we'll be having fun, next minute I'll be naked for no apparent reason. Like, that's how I drink. And I thought that was alcoholism. When I eventually arrived here in Alcoholics Anonymous, I went and saw my family doctor because the judge told me I was going to do 2 years prison. Scared the living hell out of me. I went and did something I'd never done before. I went and told a man the whole truth. Everything. How much I drank, how much I didn't want to drink anymore, how I felt there was something wrong with my brain because I didn't want to do it, but then I keep doing it at 21. And within a very, very, very short period of time, I landed in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got welcomed in. I don't know how many of you can remember your first meeting, but you probably don't remember a lot of what the really serious people who knew what they were talking about actually said. I don't remember one word. I remember how 2 or 3 people made me feel. Because I'd never felt welcomed anywhere in my entire life. And you guys welcomed me. And if there's any newcomers here, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to encourage you to come all the way in and sit all the way down. I hope you find what I found here. I found love. I found understanding. I found people who were patient. Things I'm not a lot of the time. But I went to meetings where there were lots of old timers. There was no 21-year-olds in AA when I got sober. I'm sure there were a couple here and there in Sydney, but I didn't find any. I went to the meetings where they were 70 years old because they loved on me. I felt welcome. Eventually I was approached by a man who was properly armed with facts about himself, and we sat down and started reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous together, and when we landed on a step, we did it. I took the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with that man, and he gave me potentially the greatest gift I've ever been given. He gave me the gift of the first step. Up until that point, I didn't really understand what I was suffering from. By the time we got through those first few chapters of the book, I understood what I suffered from. See, every time I took the first drink, I couldn't stop. And even though I didn't want to do it again, I found myself listening to my brain that convinced me against my will, time and time again, to take the first drink, even though I didn't want to. Can't stop when I start, can't stop from starting. It took a really long time for me to understand the spiritual malady. But I kept coming through thick and thin. I was definitely one of the dudes in the front row with the knee that was doing that all the way through the meeting for the first 5 years. I was a Fruit Loop, absolute Fruit Loop for the first 5 years. Getting up and down, going to the bathroom, coffee, tea, cigarettes, 2 hands, nut job in Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys love me anyway. I thought I was in the quickly team. I thought I was in the, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I thought I was in the quickly team for a long time. I had a rude awakening about that not too long ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I found out I'm actually in the slowly squad. And today I'm okay with that. But it took some time for that one to settle down. And that isn't even a joke. Like, I thought you were all doing it wrong and I was doing it right. And really all I was doing was judging you from this spiritual hilltop, so I thought, to make me feel better about myself. And the truth was, that judgment came from a place of self-hatred. My sponsor says, while I'm busy attacking you with the knife, I can't help but turn the knife on myself. There was no love, absolutely no love. It was a mental, mathematical process that I took people through the book for a long time. My wife shared this morning about, her husband took her through the big book. I can guarantee you I've learned a whole lot more from her, being loving, kind, patient, tolerant, than she ever learned from me taking her through the book. I remember a few of us started a men's retreat in Sydney, 10, 12 years ago, and one of the first years we had Bob Darrell come, and Chris and Pete came, and I remember the next year we had Bob Bazance come, remember? And just before we started the weekend, I felt guilty because Bob Darrell was my sponsor. I felt guilty. I went up to Pete and Chris and pulled them aside and said, I've got something to tell you. I changed sponsors and Bob Bazance is now my sponsor. And I went, oh, okay. And then the next year we had Ralph White come down, and Chris and Pete came over to me before the conference and said, have you got anything to tell us? But Bob Darrell was great. He every time I rang him, he told me to go and find some newcomers. And I got very, very strong with that 12th step. And then when I started working with Bob Bazance, he really cracked me open to the truth, which was that I was still masquerading as something that I think you would like me to be, which was a good little AA member. And it took some time for that icy mountain to melt in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want to talk for 20 minutes. I know we want to get into the sobriety countdown. I want to share 2 or 3 little things and then I'll sit down. I'm still highly defective. And this isn't me trying to be humble, like I am highly. Ask Jodie, she'll tell you. She will. Resentful, full of fear, still impatient, intolerant, still lazy. Anyway, I won't keep going. I think you get the gist of it. And at times, it was great to hear George. At times, not recently, but at times filled with rage. I know what it's like to have rage blackouts in sobriety. I can talk about having red rage, white rage, black rage in sobriety and being blacked out. But it's not that way anymore. By opening up and sharing myself with others, by going and asking for help, men have allowed me to grow. There's no destination here in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no place that I get to. I can't get so sober I won't get drunk again. There's no end to the growth available to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. If I keep coming and keep being honest and keep humbling myself with my sponsor and other men and tell them the truth about me, dot myself in. And man, that's hard. My ego doesn't want to do it every single time. It was great to hear Matthew talk about his head Still to this day, my ego is not my own ego. I shouldn't be listening to it. But I do. It was about 10 years ago I had a locked-in session with a sponsor, and I'm Mr. AA, right? Like I've got the salute going, and I had a 5th step locked in at exactly 8 p.m. on the telephone, and I don't know whether you've raised children, but they have a tendency to get up 17 times and go to the bathroom and get water before bed, right? And this one particular occasion, Archie kept doing that, and I had an 8 p.m. commitment, and he got up one more time, and I picked him up and threw him from 10 metres across the room onto his bed. I swore at him, I raged. He was like 8. 20 years later. I slammed his door, I stomped down the hall, I slammed the hall door, and the phone rang. Oh, g'day mate, how you going? Jody came home from a meeting an hour later and both kids were still sobbing in their beds. What do? I ring my sponsor, have a conversation, I dob myself in. Haven't done since, haven't raged since. It's nearly 10 years ago. There's growth available to all of us, I believe, if we stay in the middle. It was great to hear the last speaker. It's my job to wedge myself into the middle of my home group of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be of service, to be a sponsor, to get to work on 12 steps, and to be a sponsor. I've grown just as much by being a sponsor. There's no praise around sponsorship. It's painful at times. People die. I know you didn't kill them, Chris, but I heard you talk about people dying yesterday. It's really painful. There's no acclaim around 12 step, and there's no blame either. For a long time, I was taking all the acclaim for all these people that were getting so, well, look at me, I'm such a great sponsor, until one of them died. And then I had to take the blame. And when I took the blame for that one, I realised that I was taking the acclaim for all the others, and I stopped. No more. My job is to share my experience, strength and hope, and it's God's job to water the seed. I don't know where all that came from. A guy asked me I was leading a retreat a year or so ago, and a guy started asking me about perfection, like I know anything about perfection. I can tell you I was acting like a perfectionist for a long time in Alcoholics Anonymous, which simply means I'm masquerading as someone that's perfect so that you'll like me. Yeah. And I said, there's no perfection here in AA. I thought that I was perfectly doing whatever. Yeah. I found out it's not about getting perfect. It's about persistence. It's just backing up day after day after day, reporting for duty and asking how I can be the most use to God today. And of course, in the audience, someone then asked, so Darren, if you did get perfect, and I was just like, clearly Jodie wasn't in the audience, otherwise she would have went. And I just said, that day is never going to arrive. I'm never going to get perfect. I'm always going to be defective. And I believe because we're human beings. And then I was hit by a thought that I'd never had before. And the thought was simply that if I did ever get perfect, that'd be the day that God called me home. Because I'd no longer be any use to anyone. See, I don't share about my defects out of some, grandiosity. I hate it. I hate talking about it. I share about it to make it okay for people to come up to me after the meeting and go, man, I did that thing. What do? How do I can't stop. How do I, please help me. because that's what my sponsor did for me. Shared openly about his defects from the floor of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I knew that he needed to be my next sponsor. So if it's not about getting perfect, what's it about? It's about one day at a time, putting one foot in front of the other, trying to help God's kids. And help isn't even really the right word. A helper leans down from a position of superiority. A servant gets down on the floor and looks eye to eye. We're to learn how to be a servant, not a helper, here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm about to rotate off as delegate. It's been an interesting 3 years. We've just finished the Sydney National Convention. That was an interesting 2 years. I'm a glutton for punishment in service in Alcoholics Anonymous, but somehow it keeps me sober. It keeps me in the middle. I want to share 2 things and I'll sit down. I said 3 before. Einstein, towards the end of his life, used to tour the US and give lectures at US universities. And one of the questions he got asked all the time was, do you believe in God? Because people thought that he was an atheist by the way he talked about God. He always answered the same thing. He said, I believe in the God of Spinoza. And Spinoza was a Dutch philosopher who lived in the 1600s. And this is what Spinoza would say about God. And if you belong to a religion, please don't tackle me and beat me up after this. What I'm trying to do is open up this God word, this spirit world word for everybody who doesn't identify in a religion. Spinoza would say this about God. Spinoza says this if he was God. God says, what I want you to do is go out into the world and enjoy your life. I want you to sing. I want you to have fun. I want you to enjoy everything that I've made for you. Stop going into those cold, dark temples that you built for yourself saying that they're my house. My house is the mountains, the woods, the rivers, the lakes, the beaches. That's where I live, and there I express my love for you. If you can't read me in a sunrise and a landscape and the look on your friend's face, in your son's eyes, you'll never find me in any book. I'm pure love. Stop asking me for forgiveness. There's nothing to forgive. If I made you the way you are, filled with passions, limitations, pleasures, feelings, needs, inconsistencies, free will, how can I blame you for being you? How can I punish you for being the way that I made you? What kind of God do you think I am? Respect your peers. Don't do to them what you don't want them to do to you. All I ask is that you pay attention to your life. This life is the only thing there is here and now. I've set you absolutely free. No prizes, no punishments, no sins, no virtues. No one carries a marker. No one keeps any records. You're absolutely free to create your own life. Heaven or hell, right now, it's your choice. I like that a lot.
Right on!
I like that a lot. I believe that I have the ability to create my own heaven right now. All I need to do is remember that if I'm in resentment, I'm living in yesterday. If I'm in fear, I'm living in tomorrow. I'm not in the now. I wonder where God's gotten to. It's because I'm not here in the now where God lives, because God doesn't live in yesterday and God doesn't live in tomorrow. There's a gift available here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that gift, we disguise that gift. We call it this really strange name that has absolutely nothing to do with the word gift. We call it the present. Because I'm highly defective, because I'm still filled with fear, because I'm still filled with judgment and resentment at times, I split off from now. So it's my job to get back in meditation every morning and get back to the now before I start my day. My sponsor said on the phone to me not that long ago, when I was beating myself up again, he said, Darren, everything's already okay. You're perfectly imperfect. God's made you exactly the way you are. There's absolutely nothing missing. You're right on track. You're right on time. You don't have to become anything more than you already are. The process of recovery is the process of letting go. It's the process of unbecoming all the things that aren't the real use of the real you can turn up. It's the process of coming home to who you really are, coming home to God. I don't know how that lands with you, but it wakes me back up to the truth. The truth is God loves me. The truth is God wants everything to be perfect in my life today. And all I have to do is come back to the now. That's it. I want to thank the committee for organising such a wonderful weekend. You've cracked me open, and to the newcomer, this is the greatest show on earth. So jump on the pony, kick like hell, hold on real tight, because you're in for the ride of your life. Get a sponsor, get a home group, get to work on the 12-step program of recovery from alcoholism, because there's no other program of recovery from alcoholism offered in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thanks for listening.
Please stay in your seat, because I think Jodie's going to start us on a wonderful countdown. So if you haven't been for one, hang about.